The young and the restless spoilers. The bitter taste of lukewarm espresso did nothing to wash away the sour news scrolling across Phyllis Summers' tablet screen. Sitting in the dimly lit corner of the Grand Phoenix Lounge, she swiped through the Genoa City Chronicle's digital edition, her manicured nail tapping a frantic rhythm against the glass. The headline was a scream in bold black font: Chancellor Matriarch declares war. Jill Abbott vows to dismantle Kane Ashby's empire. Phyllis narrowed her eyes, reading the details of Jill's press release. It wasn't just a business maneuver, it was a public execution. Jill was calling for a complete audit of Kane's recent acquisitions, citing irregularities and ethical breaches regarding his new AI ventures. She was effectively painting a target on his back for the SEC, the Newman family, and anyone else looking to take a shot. "You vindictive old witch," Phyllis hissed under her breath, the sound lost in the ambient hum of the hotel lobby. Despite the tangled, often toxic web of relationships in Genoa City, Phyllis felt a sudden, fierce surge of loyalty toward Kane. They were the outliers now, the ones willing to play dirty to survive in a town dominated by the moralizing Newmans and the self-righteous Abbotts. Kane had let her in on the ground floor when everyone else had shut the door in her face. He was her ally, and Jill, with her pearls and her holier-than-thou attitude, was trying to burn him to the ground. Phyllis stood up, smoothing her skirt with a sharp, aggressive motion. She wouldn't let this slide. She couldn't. Miles away, the air in the Chancellor estate was stifling, thick with the scent of lilies and the oppressive weight of history. Jill Abbott paced the length of the drawing room, her hand clutching her chest as if to physically hold her heart together. The phone on the mahogany desk had been ringing incessantly. Victor Newman's people, lawyers, reporters, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. Her confrontation with Victor earlier that morning had been the catalyst. The mustache had loomed over her, his voice a low rumble of menace, warning her that if she didn't leash Kane, he would destroy everything the Chancellor name stood for. And then there was Kane himself, her son, or at least the man who wore her son's face, plotting, scheming, twisting the legacy she had fought so hard to protect. "I won't let him ruin us," Jill whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling. "I built this. Catherine left this to me." A sharp pain, like a serrated knife, twisted behind her sternum. Jill gasped, her vision blurring at the edges. She reached out for the back of the sofa, her knuckles white, but her grip failed. The room tilted violently. The expensive oriental rug rushed up to meet her. There was no one to catch her, no one to hear the soft thud of her body hitting the floor, nor the shallow, ragged breaths that followed. The silence of the mansion, usually a comfort, now felt like a tomb. The news broke an hour later. Phyllis was back in her suite, pacing like a caged tigress, formulating a counter-strategy to Jill's press release. When the breaking news alert chimed on the television. Breaking news: Jill Abbott rushed to Genoa City Memorial Hospital in critical condition. Sources say the Chancellor's CEO collapsed at her home, following a week of high-profile corporate disputes. Phyllis stopped dead in her tracks. She stared at the screen, watching the stock footage of an ambulance flashing its lights outside the Chancellor gates. A complex mix of emotions churned in her gut. Shock, certainly, but it was quickly overtaken by a dark, opportunistic pragmatism. Jill was down. The gatekeeper was incapacitated. Well, Phyllis murmured, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous idea. Most people would send flowers. Most people would offer thoughts and prayers. But Phyllis Summers had never been most people. She saw the chessboard clearing. If Jill was out of the picture, even temporarily, the pressure on Kane would lift. But more than that, Phyllis felt a pull to see it for herself. She needed to see the woman who threatened her ally reduced to mortal frailty. It was a morbid curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe it was just the predator in her needing to confirm the prey was truly wounded. She grabbed her coat and sunglasses. She wasn't going as a concerned friend. She was going as a ghost. Genoa City Memorial Hospital was a labyrinth of sterile white corridors and hushed conversations. Phyllis moved through the hallways with the practiced ease of someone who had spent far too much of her life in these places, usually plotting or grieving. She wore a nondescript trench coat, the collar turned up, and kept her head low. avoiding the gaze of the nurses' station. She knew the layout. The VIP wing donor suites, as they were politely called, was on the 4th floor. That's where the Newmans and Chancellors always ended up. Reaching the elevators, she waited until the doors were just closing before slipping her hand in to stop them. A young intern inside blinked at her, but Phyllis projected an aura of such terrifying authority that he didn't dare ask for her visitor's pass. She stepped out on the 4th floor, the air cooler here, smelling of antiseptic and expensive floral arrangements. It wasn't hard to find the room. Two private security guards were posted near the nurses' station, distracted by a heated conversation with a doctor. Phyllis seized the moment, slipping into the alcove of a supply closet until they turned their backs. With the grace of a cat, she moved silently down the hall, scanning the room numbers. 402. Jill Abbott. The door was heavy, solid wood rather than the flimsy particle board of the general wards. Phyllis placed her hand on the handle, hesitating for a fraction of a second. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the intrusion. She turned the handle slowly, praying the latch was silent. It clicked softly, a sound swallowed by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors inside. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her, leaning back against it to catch her breath. The room was dim, illuminated only by the glow of the medical equipment and the pale city light filtering through the blinds. And there she was. Jill Abbott looked smaller than Phyllis had ever seen her. The fire that usually defined the woman's sharp tongue, the imperious glare. The perfectly coiffed armor was gone. In its place was a pale, fragile figure almost swallowed by the crisp white hospital linens. An oxygen cannula was looped over her ears, and in 4 drips stood like a sentinel beside the bed, feeding fluids into her bruised arm. Phyllis pushed off the door and approached the bed, her footsteps silent on the linoleum. She stopped at the foot of the bed, her hands gripping the plastic rail. She expected to feel pity. She waited for that softening of the heart that was supposed to come when seeing an enemy laid low. But as she looked at Jill's face, slack and defenseless in unconsciousness, Phyllis felt the old anger flare up, hot and bright. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Phyllis whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. She moved to the side of the bed, looming over the unconscious woman. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was the only response. "You have everything, Jill," Phyllis continued, her voice dropping to a hiss. "The money, the mansion, the legacy. But that wasn't enough. You had to come after Kane. You had to try and destroy the one thing he built for himself." Phyllis remembered the look in Kane's eyes the last time they spoke with desperation of a man who was tired of apologizing for his existence. Jill was the architect of that desperation. She was the one who held the keys to the kingdom and refused to let anyone else in, unless they danced to her tune. "You think you're the protector of this town," Phyllis said, leaning closer, her face inches from the plastic guardrail. "You think you're the grand matriarch, but look at you now." Jill's eyelids fluttered briefly, a reflex of the dreaming mind, but she did not wake. Phyllis watched the rise and fall of her chest, the struggle inherent in every breath. "You pushed too hard," Phyllis said, her tone shifting from anger to a cold, analytical observation. "You took on Victor, you took on Kane, and you thought you were invincible. But you're just flesh and blood, Jill, just like the rest of us." A strange impulse took hold of Phyllis. She reached out, her hand hovering over Jill's arm. She wanted to shake her, to wake her up so she could see the fire in Phyllis's eyes, so she could know that even here, in her weakest moment, she was being judged. But she pulled her hand back. The vulnerability of the scene was unsettling. This was the woman who had gone toe-to-toe with Catherine Chancellor, who had survived wars with Jack and Victor. To see her reduced to this, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a warning. Phyllis walked to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds at the city below. The lights of Genoa City twinkled in the twilight, indifferent to the drama unfolding in room 402. "You better wake up," Phyllis said, her back to the bed, her reflection ghosting in the glass. "Because if you die now, you let him win. And I can't have you becoming a martyr, Jill. I need you to see what we're going to do. I need you to see us win." She turned back to the bed, her expression hardening. The sympathy that had threatened to surface was shoved back down, replaced by the steely resolve that had kept Phyllis Summers alive all these years. This hospitalization changed the game. It left a power vacuum at Chancellor. It left Kane vulnerable to Victor's attacks without his mother as a buffer. But it also gave him a window of opportunity if they moved fast. Phyllis looked at the door. She had to leave before she was discovered. She had to get to Kane. They needed to strategize. But she couldn't tear her eyes away from Jill. "Rest up, Jill," Phyllis murmured, a cruel smile touching her lips. "You're going to need your strength for what comes next." The monitor beeped steadily, counting out the seconds of a fragile life. Phyllis took one last look, memorizing the image of her fallen adversary, and then slipped out the door, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. The game had changed, and Phyllis was ready to make her move. The air in the Chancellor Mansion was thick with tension, a heavy silence that seemed to press against the dark wood paneling of the living room. Jill Abbott stood by the window, her fingers tightening around the silk curtains as she peered out into the gray Genoa city. Afternoon. Her heart, recently a source of such physical frailty, now beat with a different kind of rhythmed cold, steady thrum of calculation. She had been watching. For weeks, she had observed Kane Ashby's erratic movements, his desperate, almost manic energy as he waged his war against Victor Newman. The reports were damning. Newman Enterprises was bleeding, assets frozen or destroyed. And at the center of the chaos stood Kane, wielding a digital weapon he barely seemed to control. But it wasn't the corporate sabotage that made Jill's eyes narrow. It was the way he looked at Lily when he thought no one was watching, a look of possessive desperation that Jill recognized all too well. "He's going to drag her down with him," Jill whispered to the empty room. "Not if I burn the bridge first." Across town, in the sleek, modern living room of Lily's penthouse, the atmosphere was suffocating. Kane paced the floor, his hands raking through his hair. "Victoria is lying, Lily. You know how the Newmans operate," Kane pleaded, stopping to look at her. "She'll say anything to protect her father's empire. The misconduct she talked about, it's just aggressive business. It's strategy." Lily sat on the edge of the sofa, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But the seed of doubt Victoria had planted, the allegations of unauthorized server access and financial diversion had taken root. "It didn't sound like strategy, Kane," Lily said, her voice steady but low. "She had logs, timestamps. You were moving money through shell accounts before the deal even closed. Why didn't you tell me? I was protecting you." Kane knelt before her, reaching for her hands. "I wanted to hand you the world, Lily. A legacy for the twins. If I cut a few corners to bypass Victor's blockade, I did it for us." Lily pulled her hands away, standing up and walking to the kitchen island. "That's just it. You always have a reason. But there's always another secret behind the reason. What else are you hiding?" Kane opened his mouth to protest, but the sharp chime of the doorbell cut him off. He glared at the door, as if the intruder were personally attacking him. "I need to go to the office," Kane said, his jaw tight. "I'll fix this, Lily. I promise." He stormed out, brushing past the visitor in the hallway. Lily looked up to see Jill standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Jill," Lily frowned. "I didn't expect." "We need to talk," Jill said, stepping inside and closing the door with a definitive click. "Alone?" 10 minutes later, tea that neither of them would drink sat cooling on the coffee table. Jill sat with a posture that defied her recent health scares, her eyes locked on Lily. "Kane was just here trying to spin Victoria's accusations, wasn't he?" Jill asked. "He says he did it for the family," Lily replied, the exhaustion evident in her voice. "He says Victoria is twisting the truth." "Victoria is only scratching the surface," Jill said, her voice dropping an octave. "She's angry about the money, but she doesn't know the history. She doesn't know about the software." Lily's brow furrowed. "What software?" Jill took a breath, the weight of the secret she had kept for years sitting heavy on her tongue. "Do you remember the Ascension project? 3 years ago. The deal that fell apart right before you launched your lifestyle brand's tech division?" "Of course," Lily said. "The coding was flawed. We lost millions in potential venture capital. Kane said the developers were incompetent. The developers were fine, Jill corrected sharply. Kane sabotaged it. Lily froze. That doesn't make sense. Why would he hurt his own wife's business? Because he needed leverage, Jill said, leaning forward. He was in debt, Lily. Deep debt from a gambling relapse he never told you about. He needed a quick influx of cash that couldn't be traced. So, he set up a back door in the Ascension software. Jill pulled a folded dossier from her purse and slid it across the table. He didn't do it alone. Or rather, he didn't get his hands dirty. He tricked Phyllis. Phyllis, Lily's voice rose in disbelief. Phyllis Summers? Phyllis was working on a security patch for Jabba at the time, Jill explained, tapping the papers. Kane fed her false information, making her believe that your Ascension protocol had a vulnerability that threatened Jabba's data. He manipulated her paranoia. He gave her the fix a piece of code he claimed would patch the hole. Jill paused, letting the reality sink in. But it wasn't a patch. It was an extraction tool. When Phyllis installed it, thinking she was protecting her interests, she unknowingly drained your project's liquidity into an offshore account controlled by Kane. He used Phyllis as a mule. Lily stared at the documents. The dates, the transaction IDs, the communications logs between a masked IP address and Phyllis's private server. It was all there. He told me the project failed, Lily whispered, her eyes filling with tears. He held me while I cried about losing that deal. He told me we'd rebuild together. He stole from you, Lily, Jill said ruthlessly, and he set Phyllis up to take the fall if anyone ever looked too closely. He destroyed your hard work to pay off his bookie, and he let you believe you weren't good enough to run that company. The sound of the elevator dinging made both women jump. The door slid open, and Phyllis Summers strode in, looking furious. She had clearly bypassed the doorman. I want to know why my name is being flagged in a 3-year-old audit at Newman, Phyllis shouted, throwing her bag onto a chair. She stopped dead when she saw Jill and the open dossier. You, Phyllis hissed, pointing a manicured finger at Jill. What are you doing? Telling the truth, Jill said calmly, about how Kane played you for a fool. Phyllis marched over, snatching the papers from the table. She scanned them, her green eyes widening as the technical jargon clicked into place. The Ascension patch. I thought that was a firewall update. He told me it was a firewall update. He used you, Phyllis, Lily said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and grief. He used you to steal from me. Phyllis looked up, her face flushing with humiliation and anger. That son of a bitch. He told me he was helping me get leverage on Billy. He traded me that code as a favor. I didn't know it was rigging your accounts. He manipulated both of us, Lily said, standing up. The sorrow was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He made us enemies to cover his tracks. I'm going to kill him, Phyllis growled, crumpling the paper in her fist. I am going to destroy him. Get in line, Lily said. The confrontation happened an hour later at the athletic club. Kane was sitting at the bar, nursing a scotch, looking every bit the misunderstood martyr. When he saw Lily enter, his face lit up with a hopeful, pathetic smile. Lily, you came, he said, sliding off the stool. I knew you'd understand. I knew. He stopped when he saw Phyllis flank her on the left and Jill on the right. The three women stood like the Furies, a wall of judgment he couldn't charm his way past. Lily, Kane's smile faltered. Tell me about the Ascension project, Kane, Lily said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried through the quiet bar, silencing the nearby tables. Kane's face drained of color. I don't know what you mean. That was years ago. I know about the code, Phyllis spat, stepping forward. I know you used me to embezzle money from your own wife. You made me an accessory to fraud. Kane, no, you don't understand, Kane stammered, looking wildly between them. It was a loan. I was going to pay it back. The gambling, it was just a bad run. I intended to put the money back before anyone noticed. You watched me cry, Lily said, stepping closer, her eyes boring into his. You watched me doubt myself. You let me believe I had failed. And the whole time, you were the one holding the knife. I did it for us, Kane shouted, desperation cracking his voice. I needed to clear the debt so they wouldn't come after you, so they wouldn't hurt the twins. You are the danger to the twins, Jill cut in, her voice icy. Your lies, your instability. You aren't protecting them, Kane. You're the liability. Lily looked at the man she had loved, the father of her children, and saw nothing but a stranger. The charm, the accent, the apologies, it was all a veneer over a hollow, selfish core. We're done, Lily said. This isn't a separation. This isn't a break. You are going to pack your things, and you are going to leave my home. If you ever try to use my business or my children for your schemes again, I will hand this file to the district attorney myself. Kane reached for her arm. Lily, please, baby. She recoiled as if burned. Don't touch me. Phyllis leaned in, her voice a dangerous purr. And if you think you can hide behind Victor or anyone else, remember this, I know where all the digital bodies are buried. You made me a weapon, Kane. Fine, now I'm pointed at you. Kane looked around the room. He saw the judgment in the eyes of the patrons, the steel in his mother's stance, the hatred in Phyllis's glare, and the utter finality in Lily's expression. He was cornered. He set his glass down on the bar with a shaking hand. Without a word, he turned and walked out, the heavy doors swinging shut behind him, sealing his exile. Later that evening, the adrenaline had faded, leaving Lily sitting in the dim light of her living room, staring at the city skyline. Jill stood by the door, ready to leave. You did the right thing, Jill said softly. It doesn't feel like it, Lily admitted. It feels like I just cut off a limb. Gangrene usually does, Jill replied. She walked over and placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. Listen to me, Lily. He's desperate now. A man like Kane, when he's stripped of his mask, he doesn't just go away. He reinvents the lie. Jill tightened her grip slightly. He will try to come back. He will use the kids. He will use your pity. He will try to convince you that this was all a misunderstanding or a moment of weakness. Lily looked up, her eyes dry and hard. Be careful, Jill warned, her voice grave. He's not just a liar, Lily. He's a survivor. And survivors will drown anyone close to them just to stay afloat. Don't let him pull you under again. Lily nodded slowly. He won't. Jill turned and left, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Lily remained alone, the silence of the penthouse no longer oppressive, but protective. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Paul, she said when the police chief answered. I need to file a restraining order, and I have some evidence regarding a financial crime I'd like to submit. Outside, the wind howled through the streets of Genoa City, a storm brewing that matched the one Kane Ashby had finally unleashed upon himself.